Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. And it's my privilege to welcome to today's program Chris O'Brien, who is Senior Vice President at C.H. Robinson. And the topic of today's conversation is Beyond the Calculation, how to use total landed costs for supply chain benefits. So, this total landed cost is a topic that is, always top of mind for supply chain logistics executives. So, definitely looking forward to getting Chris's thoughts and perspective on this important topic. Before we get started, I just want to remind all of you who are joining us today that our goal here at Talking Logistics is really to involve you, the audience, as part of the conversation. So as Chris and I are kind of talking through this topic, if you've got your own questions for Chris, you can go ahead and do so via the submit a question button. Just as a reminder, if you are logged in as a guest, you will have to register first in order to ask a question. So with that, Chris, welcome to the program.
Thanks a lot, Adrian.
One of the things that before we kind of dive into talking about total landed costs, one of the things I always like to ask my guests is, how they got involved in the supply chain logistics field. So if you could just quickly tell us a little bit about, your career path, how and why you got interested and involved with supply chain logistics, and kind of what your current role is today.
Great. Thanks for having me on today. So supply chain and logistics, and C.H. Robinson in particular, was really my first job out of university. My first real job out of university, and that was a little over 20 years ago. So I got in when C.H. Robinson was a pretty small company, or we were under $1 billion, and the supply chain third-party logistics business was not as well known. There weren't that many household names, and there were no Wall Street darlings and private equity interests at that point. So I felt like I really got lucky in finding C.H. Robinson. I will admit that I am a little bit biased in the 3PL model, and that we found is a great way for us to continue to approach our customers. I started out in a sales and account management role. I was in our Chicago office. I've always been in somewhat of a customer-facing role with Robinson. After that, spent time on site in a supply chain engineering role. I was on site at a major retailer as an account manager, and we were doing an inbound program, and that's probably where some of my early interest in total landed cost and sales terms and Incoterms came from. Robinson was expanding into Europe after that. I did manage a branch and open a branch office and manage it in Raleigh, North Carolina for a few years, and then went over as we made an increased commitment to become more of a global 3PL. I spent about 5 years in Europe, initially in a customer role, and later as president of our European division as we made some acquisitions there. I've been in Minneapolis for 10 years now, and in the vice president role, and for the last year as senior vice president. So my role, Adrian, is really strategy and execution on sales and account management. Our 40,000 customers I interact with and get to spend a lot of time with our largest and most integrated. I've been responsible for developing our outsourced solutions, so a differentiated brand at Robinson for our most integrated customers, and I get to spend a lot of time with our people, our technology, our global technology, and our customized customer interfaces. So I have a lot of fun. I feel like I got extremely lucky, and every day I continue to talk to great customers and great employees. So it was not as much of a visible career path, I would say, coming out of university as it is today. And to me, the opportunities, both from an education and career standpoint in this field, have gone tenfold. Everyone, the whole industry is much more visible, and for a lot of reasons that I think we'll talk about as we get into why total landed cost is important.
Great.
So, I think most people know a little bit about Robinson and our approach, and I guess I could talk about that a bit. Our approach or our perspective or background on total landed cost is really as a manager of transportation, as a provider of global TMS services, as a global freight forwarder, as a customs house broker, as a provider today of some total landed cost reporting suites to our customers, and then kind of lastly, and I would say probably most uniquely, as a owner of freight. So we are a beneficial owner of freight in our produce business, where we are an importer, an owner of record, and a distribution company. So I feel like you put all that together, and our perspective on total land cost is fairly unique.
Great, great. Well, obviously you've had a good and diverse experience there at C.H. Robinson, and I do want to mention that C.H. Robinson is a sponsor of Talking Logistics, so definitely appreciate the support there. So let's get right into kind of the total landed cost discussion now. It seems like it would be such a kind of easy answer, easy question to answer, right? What is the total cost of manufacturing and delivering a product, to a customer? And yet many companies really struggle, answering that question. So, why is calculating total landed costs, a challenge for many companies? And what are the kind of the consequences of not having, good knowledge about total landed cost?
Well, yeah, obviously you're right. It is a complex subject. And first, I'd say I don't really have an estimate, but I experience very few companies that fully understand it, their own total landed cost, and that is testament to some of the complexity. But I would say, first of all, it's very broad. Understanding all the production cost or procurement cost of your goods really at origin is probably the simpler part of it. But the science is really understanding that same cost at the customer. So understanding all the inputs and cost of moving those goods, the fees, there's just a lot there. So yeah, I would say that there are consequences, but to my earlier point, I really think there's more of a relative advantage in understanding it, as I feel like few do. But I guess part of why I would say it's complex is just think about all the internal departments that are responsible for components of those inputs. You've got you've got product goods, you've got procurement, you've got transportation rates. Up there for a minute, there's your foreign inland, your ocean, your port handling, your rail distribution, DC, inland distribution. So many different transportation inputs, agency fees, inventory carrying costs, duty, storage, detention. There's just so many different components, and that's a lot of different groups that aren't always that coordinated. There's just places to go. I'd say the next level of complexity comes in from all the different systems involved. So we work with very few shippers that have everything. They're making acquisitions. They've got multiple systems that don't talk to each other, multiple divisions and continents. So getting these groups committed is hard. Getting them committed with all sort of senior level executive leadership is tough and almost impossible. And I think so getting this at the sort of the CEO radar is one of the most important things where we see success with it. So somebody really has to make the case for all the work that is involved. So certainly there are consequences, there are opportunities, but I think, I don't know if you saw, the Hackett Group study released last year probably points to me one of the most important things. They've studied the relative total landed cost differences from China in particular over the last 6 years versus U.S. manufacturing. They said in 6 years, the gap of total landed cost has decreased from China 50%. So it's that Chinese advantage has been cut in half, and they estimated that this year it would be down to 16. And I think the other thing they polled was that 20% of the shippers that they polled said they plan to reduce and redistribute to U.S. manufacturing about 20% of their sourcing. And one, I thought that, well, that's great news for the U.S. economy. But as I was thinking about that, I thought the real question, Adrian, would be how many of those polled really understand the math behind those decisions? These are such big decisions of where you source your goods from. If you take that complexity that we just talked about and put it together with systems and put it all together in one place, one of my concerns out there is that a lot of people are guessing at these decisions or waiting for it to be close enough, and I think that's dangerous. So the complexity is really, to me, driven from having the process, the technology, but really the commitment and the will to get going at what is really a challenging process should you choose to start.
Yeah, no, great points. And I think, that complexity, I know I want to ask you a little bit more around kind of the role of technology and people. But because I think that is, those obviously people and technology play a role in this and create not only challenges, but also opportunities and are part of um, the part of the piece of the puzzle in terms of doing this right. One of the things that I also see, in addition to, this being a complex process and maybe companies that don't having a firm grip on all the information that they need to do it, or the skills or the understanding of how to calculate total landed cost, is what I see is a lot of companies kind of do this after the fact, right? So they may take, all the invoices that have come in, at the end of the month, add up all the costs, and kind of with a broad brush, kind of allocate those costs across all the different products they might have shipped that month. And, obviously, that's not an ideal approach. For one, not all products are created equal. And secondly, if you wait till the end of the month, or, worse, till the end of the quarter to kind of do this kind of analysis, well, by then it's too late to do any kind of, take any action to control those costs. So, is part of the objective to kind of move total landed cost calculations from being a, back end after the fact process to more of a front end real time, calculation? And why is that important?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that when you see a process like that where they are adding up invoices, my guess is that that is probably more tied to a finance-driven cost allocation process than it is. I'm sure sometimes that is done under the banner of a total landed cost exercise, but I would guess when you see that, it does not last very long. It's an attempt at, in some point, initiative that's going to die out. So yeah, it is critical to just think about all those inputs that we just talked about. You're not going to capture all of those and have time to do anything with them through a manual process. And I just think that the need to the reason for this to be more and more relevant is because of the volatility and how much things change. The labor rates changes are a little bit more steady, but fossil fuel rates change quickly. Duty changes change quickly and can be for unpredictable trade or political reasons. There's a lot of nasty surprises in terms of fees that are added on, in terms of customs in a lot of unique places around the world. So this marketplace changes so much, and these choices can't be made with sort of a close enough estimation. But yeah, to me, it is an upfront process. You have to have a mechanism to capture real time, because it really starts, before you want to measure something, it really starts by building a process, building tools to capture it, building in commitment. And today we do work with customers that truly care about this. A lot of times it is sort of due to the environment or business model that they are in, and they may have more options in terms of where to source. They may be in thinner margin business. But when I see it, it's that commitment from the top to help. And it's almost always with an upfront process. It starts with a decision, because I think frequently, I think even the concept is misunderstood. I think you can still pick up articles that talk about total landed cost being about what it costs to land it at a destination. If it's a U.S. report, it's about getting it to a U.S. report. And people really, it doesn't end there. People really miss distribution. And to me, they're really, the focus tends to be on duty, transportation, and fees, and that just leaves so many different components that can be missed. But I would be surprised if it's ever a robust process that lasts if it is an after-the-fact collection of information.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. You also brought up, I think part of that complexity that you talked about earlier is, how broadly do you define, total landed cost? Because I think if you probably ask 10 supply chain executives, what is total landed cost, you might get 10 different answers, right? They may only see it as, the cost it takes, to land at the port. Other folks may say it's the cost to get into the consumer's hands. They may, if you're a retailer, they may look at all the costs and look at labor costs at the store level and all that, right? So yeah, I think you can, have as broad or as narrow a definition around, total landed cost. And of course, the broader it is, probably the more complex it is to get your arms around it. One of you wrote a great blog posting last year where you talked about, four things that, companies have to calculate total landed cost. And one of those things is SKU level data, which, especially after reading your posting, kind of made me realize that that's really almost the cornerstone, in terms of doing this right. And yet many companies, again, still lack, timely and accurate and complete, data around their products, whether it's, cube, dimensions, and the weight. Why is SKU level data so important? How can companies kind of overcome some of the challenges that they may have in kind of capturing this data? And, what insights, what value can you get from having, accurate and complete SKU level data?
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Adrian. We talked about, I think, four things in that blog that are critical: executive buy-in, getting your best people on it, good TMS technology to capture it, and SKU level data. And I think SKU level is really, I don't know if you'd say it's the most important, but to me, you're right. It's the building block. It's where you start. And you don't source or manufacture or ship a container of something. You source and manufacture products. Your customers order products, and that starts at the SKU level. So best-in-class companies start with thinking about total landed cost at a SKU level, and they build in to their processes, to their TMS, to working with their 3PL partners, great cataloging routines in terms of dimensions and weight. So these are the building blocks of figuring out what it costs to get that SKU from that manufacturer to that final customer. You mentioned it before, a lot of total landed cost reporting starts with assumptions. You can start at the SKU level, you can get away from some of these assumptions and then build in control. So again, best in class, they start with SKU level data. They build in processes, in our case, that we help support by sending out triggers. A new order came in, here's a SKU that we don't have the internal and the external dimensions on. Alert, something has to be done so that we can build that in. So if you do start at that SKU level data, you can get so much more. You can capture purchase price per SKU, production cost per SKU, distribution cost per SKU. It's great information to a lot of different divisions in the company. You can get away from the assumptions. It's great information. We see a lot of our customers use it for sales and marketing. It's a better way to understand true hidden costs or accessorials, which it's not a container that's driving damage, it's product or packaging that drives damage. So you can get at that. A whole other bonus of being able to build your ordering process around SKU level is container utilization too. So you can look at, you can get at better reporting on how much you're utilizing the container. So when we build total landed cost reporting, we're taking the percentage of allocation of that container or truck or air freight pallet from a weight and dimensional standpoint that SKU built up. So from there, you can allocate everything proportionally and get at just a much finer grain. So there's a ton that you get out of it, and but I agree with your statement. It really is the building block of better TLC processes, and it just leads to so much more, such better discipline in terms of how you were to bid product next time, how you should look at similar products, what SKUs it should ship with as you look at from an optimization standpoint. Such a greater ability to optimize. But if you look at your total landed cost reporting, you see something, you don't have a SKU level understanding, it's hard to know what to do next.
Right. No, I agree with all that. I mean, a lot of times, again, going back to my earlier comment, a lot of the understanding or the approaches companies take sometimes is more at a more aggregate level, and it's hard to kind of derive any kind of insights, or like you said, some of these hidden costs perhaps are kind of embedded in there that you can't see because you're kind of looking at things from too high a level, too aggregate a level. And really the more granular you can get, particularly at the SKU level, I think, like you said, you're able to see different opportunities and different insights that can drive different actions to help you manage your costs more effectively. You talked about people and technology as well, as part of those building blocks or those things that you really need. Let's focus on people, right now. What role do, frontline associates play in this? What role does the executive, team play in this? You mentioned kind of executive buy-in early on in your comments. Is there any kind of special skills or training that you need to do total landed cost effectively? And then I guess the other question is, which I kind of see as a common theme through a lot of the conversations I have with folks around a lot of these initiatives, is do you see that companies that already have kind of a continuous improvement culture, whether it's Lean or Six Sigma, are they better kind of prepared or motivated, to take on this challenge?
That's a great question. I guess I don't know that I've noticed a particular correlation between companies with strong process improvement or Six Sigma cultures that have success at this. I would assume that those companies, however, would be more prepared to support a process. They would be more prepared to show a commitment, and I would think that those companies are likely to be better at measurements and analytics. And I think we found, a lot of factors that are correlative in terms of companies that do it well today, companies that have a higher, like I mentioned before, better opportunity for looking at changes. But I think it takes process and discipline and culture to commit. So back to your question, I would think that companies that have a strong process improvement culture are much better prepared. And I think it's an important part of carrying company messages to get to your executive question. I think many companies that you notice that have a strong process improvement culture is because you noticed it. And that means to me that it flows throughout the organization. They have a strong discipline culture for communication and strategies in general. So to pull this all back together, I think it's critical that you get executive leadership, that it flows from top to bottom to everywhere in the organization, and it gets down to the DC doc. There's so much required to be good here, and so much more to be great, that I would assume that there's got to be some correlation, but it's probably more correlative to companies that have great disciplines and communication strategies, and I think that's probably what you notice. You notice their initiatives, but everywhere. You notice their strategy, their goals, the things that they are working on. It's written on their walls. People are dedicated to it. So people are critical. The company culture, I think, is more important in that you have proven processes for being able to take on endeavors like this in other areas and initiatives. And process improvement is probably a pretty good example, if you have success there, to be able to build from. But to the people standpoint, I think one of the things we had in our blog was that you need to put some of your best people on it. And process people are going to be great there. So probably, again, another advantage if you have that culture. But again, some of the best examples we have seen, it has started with the CEO. They have determined that one of the things that they are going to get good at is this. They've also somebody's built a business case for it also. Our market provides us this opportunity. Our customers have this opportunity. We can do this with our margins, with our earnings, or risk management. We just certainly need more options. Whatever that reason is, somebody has started with a business case for it. The team, I think the people thing that's probably the most important is that there are dedicated resources. This isn't easy, and process improvement is probably the best skill set. There's a lot of help that you can get out there in the marketplace in terms of getting started and capturing it from a technology and other process standpoint. But I'm sure there's some correlation, but I believe probably the bigger one is just that it's the culture of committing to something and getting people to care, because there's so many handoff points and so many potential gaps. Park the hidden costs for a minute. There's so many visible costs that typically are missed, that it just starts with a business approach, saying this is a business case and we are going to measure this.
Great points. Before I ask, start talking about technology now and get to that point, I just want to remind everyone that if you've got a question for Chris, you can go ahead and do so via the submit a question button, and I'll, take a look, and there's some good questions out there. When we have time, I'll certainly put them forward to Chris. So, so let's talk about technology now. In some ways, I kind of see technology, in one way as part of the problem, right? Because a lot of the data and information that you need, around products to do total landed cost calculation, they're distributed across many different applications, right? They're found across many different companies, and a lot of these applications are poorly integrated, or the systems are poorly maintained. So that's certainly kind of one of the challenges, is getting access to the data and data quality and all of that. But on the other hand, when you look at the volume of data and information, particularly if you've got a very large product portfolio and, the types of analysis that you need to make, well, obviously you can't do that manually. We talked a little bit about before in terms of if you're doing something, if you're doing this manually, ultimately you're not going to succeed. So technology obviously needs to play an important role there. So what's your view of the role of the technology? How can companies overcome some of these kind of IT challenges that I talked about, and and kind of really leverage technology to kind of get the business value out of total landed costs?
Yeah, so is it part of the problem or part of the solution? It's certainly a part of the problem, but I don't think that that's any bigger for total landed cost than it is anywhere else. So yeah, there are disparate systems, multiple ERPs, divisions, for master data warehouse management, but that's a challenge that probably 90% of the world shipping and receiving the supply chain community deals with anyway. So that's always there. So I would say, yeah, it's a part of the problem, but it's 100% a part of the solution. But, I don't think anyone's doing a good job doing this manually, because really it is about automating a lot of manual processes, and there's no real good snap-on major ERP cost allocation models that help here completely, especially if you've got a part of your network on that ERP. You've got, I would say the places that we talk about needing to connect are the ERP, supplier and vendor portals, online ordering, to the extent that those are automated processes that you get technology support on, you are that much further ahead. Frequently, your global trade management and your EDI technology can frequently be a standalone. So think about all those sort of electronic connection points, your EDI, your ASNs, your in-transit notifications, customs, and again, customs clearance events, DC inventory events, so many different places where that is in a different component. It really provides kind of two big challenges. One is getting this all connected across the PO and the SKU level is really big. And then I would say, now consider that normally, even if it is connected in one system or one database, it's likely to be absent of all the necessary financial data. So when we are modeling customer supply chains, we are looking at both their physical inventory and their physical flow of information and data electronically, as well as the financial flow. And a lot of those different transactions that we just talked about will be missing some of the financial cost components of it. Commercial invoices got your production cost on it. It sometimes has an estimate. It sometimes has a commercial value. But where is the actual cost component? That's not getting through on, as you get further and further down the line. It's more the physical flow of that good. So transaction event and event data alone, it's rare that it all is connected. It's even more frequently missing that cost component. So if you park that, there's just so much to be able to pull together that, and so much of this is manual too. I was reading a study today that said 50% of some of the top 175 shippers pulled out there, but custom clearance events, less than 50% were automated. Warehouse events, it was even much less than that. If you think about all the things, so technology is great. Technology is where it eventually needs to be supported. The place to start is by automating some of these processes so that the technology can help. But there's still a lot of manual activity out there if you think about all those points from A to Z that need to be tracked. And technology supports it. Again, it starts with a commitment to be able to automate some of those processes that technology can help.
Now, Chris, you brought up an interesting point that I hadn't, kind of thought about, and maybe this gets back a little bit to the people side of things. But I think you made a great point right now in terms of, the need to kind of marry up kind of the transactional data, perhaps more of the logistics supply chain metrics, if you will, and kind of the data points there with financial ones, and kind of getting at those cost elements and kind of marrying those two up so you can do this analysis. What role does accounting and the CFO and kind of more the financial folks on your team play, you know, in terms of collaborating with supply chain, in terms of helping, with total landed costs?
Yeah, I think it's critical. They're frequently involved in the setup. They need to care about the opportunity. They've got a lot of the data. I talked about that modeling when we've been modeling some of these things. Our vision is that as you model the transactional goods, the cost allocations should flow through, and that each additional process, it just went through customs. What was that fee, and then what was the processing fee for your customs clearance agent? Let's add that in there and continue to connect so that it builds. Now, it's going to take a while till you can pull all of those parties together and continue to add on the cost. So again, that's kind of where, if you can get there, the whole total landed cost exercise becomes so much easier, because you are just looking at the total of what you have demanded your system tracks from beginning to end. Each additional input, each additional party, each additional trading partner, you are tracking both the actual cost as well as the fees from beginning to end. So yeah, when we see it done well, it's almost always involving someone from the finance department. There are a ton of benefits from doing this well. There is certainly a cost accounting advantage, and there's a lot of expertise in the finance department that as you put together a team to be able to go down this journey, you certainly need that group involved.
Great point. So now let's get to kind of, putting it all together, right? So let's say, we've been talking a lot about some of the challenges around calculating total landed cost, and some of the ways you can do this. The question now is, well, let's assume that now I've got my act together, right? I've got good total landed cost information. What do I actually do with it? How can I derive, business value, business benefit from it? What processes can I, enhance or transform, with this data?
Yeah, it sounds so hard. Why should I even think about this? So, yeah, we talked about it a little bit up front in terms of things you can get out of it. Maybe it'd be good to add a few real best case examples that we've supported or observed. And we see customers that are using it to make better sourcing choices. We talked about where that break point of country of origin, which country, which factory, how you can look at combining SKUs that are already in production. It's really important, and a lot of our customers use it for new products, new bids. We are working on putting together something for a new customer. Where should we source this? Again, but the volatility that we talked about should increase your level of interest, because it increases the benefit here. The breakpoints are getting closer. The options are more varied. There are new countries of origin with quality manufacturing coming on more and more. There's going to be more in the future, and we don't know where all those are going to be. But some of the best things we see there, they are using it to more effectively not have to guess and get away from those averages, and when they bid new business. So they use these disciplines, they end up understanding Incoterms better than others as well. So Incoterms are huge in total landed cost, and if you already understand all of the components of cost on those segments that Incoterms govern and who pays for it, you're just in a much better position to negotiate your Incoterms. Just like understanding that push point better to consider sourcing another company. A good company with great total landed cost discipline supported by systems can look at Incoterms and understand which components they would be better at handling themselves and controlling in pain. Which components would they assume based on the current negotiation that their trading partners either understand the cost of, either don't underestimate the cost of, or rather are just better at it than they are. And so there's not really, in our opinion, enough discipline around that overall understanding of Incoterms, and it's because of not understanding total landed cost, and it's because, go back to that commitment and communication. Have you communicated it to your buying department how this is all coming together? Do they know when they look at something from the sales department that we want to use our TLC modeling tool that we've built and put all this hard work into to be able to capture that. You know, there are a lot of examples. A lot of people are great at this. The big retailers, you know, they do a great job of this. They have for a long time. They really understand post-production cost, you know, as much as anyone. Like I said before, it's frequently a marketplace or business model that drives your care and total landed cost, and that's where I think it's big retail drives that a lot. They've known for as much as anyone that every penny counts. They've known it for a long time. Their supply chains are as long as anyone else's. Their demand chains are as long as anyone else's, so they're very critically dependent on. Damage, demurrage, fines are big in their world too, and so all those things can be managed better with a good understanding of total landed cost. And you know, I think it's important to kind of get in early. You don't want to wait until you are a major retailer or a major player to be able to understand that every penny counts. That's, I think, why they are so good and why they've done such a good
Yeah,
job.
I would think that it would play a role too in you know, kind of just network design. You know, I mean, what I see a lot these days is companies kind of reevaluating their network design on a more frequent basis, and I would think that having this kind of data would help them in making that kind of analysis. Do you agree?
I agree. It's another good point in making sure that your total landed cost reporting is understood by everybody. If you've got a commitment to it, a change in network design. So if you were to look at optimizing your distribution network on the outbound side, certainly you should be looking at the total landed cost impact. Also, someone should have already triggered an event where, hey, our distribution network just changed. We now need to go change all of our total landed cost calculation because this is very connected. It's not, again, it's not just origin to port, it's to
Great, great. Well, we got a question here that's kind of related from Anil, and I'll go ahead and put it up on the screen. And can you share your comments on total landed cost's role in pricing a product?
Yeah, so that's why I think it's important at the SKU level. If you do start at the SKU level, we see great examples and have customers that they look at their total landed cost reporting, and the reason they do understand it, in fact, is because it helps them build the best pricing possible. So, especially in environments where they are frequently bidding on large projects, they have high diversity of SKUs and usually a mix with each project. And I assume every environment's a competitive environment. They don't want to guess. They want to look at the best country of origin. They want to understand their current cost best as possible, and they want to. A lot of them will, because they built in dimensional and cube analysis into their reports, they'll do that. They'll run it through, okay, with this new SKU and my potential origins, what would this cost be? And I would say with some of the best case examples we see, the reason for total landed cost reporting was almost exclusively for better pricing and winning more frequently as they look at new products and new customers.
Yeah, I would think that, you know, particularly in industries where, profit margins are thin. I mean, your window of your kind of your tolerance window or your opportunity for error could be very huge if you don't really have a good understanding of total landed cost. It could make the difference between making money on a product and losing money on it. So
Yep, I think that's why big retail does such a good job of this. They're not going to guess about decisions.
great. Well, Anil, great. Thank you for the great question. Just a reminder, we're kind of getting close to wrapping up time here. I've got a couple more questions, but if you've got a question for Chris as we kind of wrap up here our conversation, please go ahead and do so via the submit a question button. So many companies obviously work with 3PL such as C.H. Robinson, work with your company, and they're kind of dependent on their 3PL partners to play a role in this. So what is the role of a logistics service provider partner in helping a company calculate total landed costs, and what should a shipper look for in a 3PL partner in terms of helping them, get to where they need to be in this area?
Thanks. It's obviously an area I feel strongly about. I look at good 3PLs being an extension of your supply chain team, and they should have good proven processes and software and technology and people and expertise to be able to help get you started here. 3PL plays a big link today in most people's supply chain, whether it's PO management or forwarding. A good multimodal global 3PL is really already in the middle of a lot of the transactions. So, if you want a 3PL for TLC support, I would say it's a great place to start. The advantage, of 3PL model is that you get the software plus the people, and you get the people that understand how to operate that software because they use it for multiple customers, they use it for their own business. You get to take advantage of the 3PL's existing expertise and investment in TMS and global trade technology. We frequently play a role as that electronic integrator of all of these events. Now, frequently there are more events that a 3PL doesn't control that need to come in to get a full suite of TLC reporting. So in our role, we integrate with other partners so that we can put that all in one place. But I think the big advantage is that the 3PL is a practitioner also. So, unlike software, the 3PL is moving freight, they're clearing customs, they're booking containers. So, as to your point of what to look at, I think based on that, it's sort of slightly evident. Are they multimodal? Are they global? Do they handle, ocean, air, rail, all those components? Are their systems robust, and are they actually connected versus, a mirror of your own potential internal challenges with multiple systems? What's their level of expertise? I think one of the most important things is do they understand TLC today? Are they supporting it? Do they get it? And I think lastly, does it mirror your supply chain? Are they global? If your supply chain doesn't start in the United States, you probably don't want your 3PL to begin and end there. And if your supply chain doesn't end at the ports, you probably don't want your forwarder 3PL that ends there as well. So today, I think the 3PL has a huge role in this. We're providing those services today. We have experts in those modes. We consult with our customers on how to get started. And again, we usually start with the basics, the building blocks of help you get to SKU level, help you automate ordering processes. We're going to be trying to do that with our customers anyway, whether you're trying to get TLC or not. So that's where I think it's really interconnected from a goal standpoint. Getting your trading partners online, investing in, we've been investing, we have one global operating system around the world. We run specific total landed cost analysis, and we work collaboratively with our customers to keep thinking of new things to build in there. But I think the most important advantage is that 3PL should already be in this area of automating, integrating, and tracking those physical and financial events. You get to use their technology and their great people.
Great points. We got another question here from Ashley. I'm going to go ahead and put it up on the screen. And Ashley wants to know, what is the role of total landed cost to determine the competitive strategy of a firm and review it periodically?
It's a great question. I think the competitive strategy of the firm probably drives your interest in total landed cost versus the other way around. I don't know why any customer, why any company wouldn't want to understand their cost. We talked a little bit about those factors where it's really important, where margins are thinner, or you have a product that can be sourced from multiple vendors. You have a high cost of transportation. There's a lot of areas where it should be higher, but I think everyone cares about being competitive, obviously. This is one big component to it. I believe it's a missing part of the arsenal for a lot of companies out there, and it's really just about being sharp. Things change fast. They are going to change faster. Are you ready to change? Sometimes it's a part of risk management too. It might not always be just a competitive advantage. you might actually want to understand the cost that you are paying for lower risk or shorter supply chains so that you can at least account for it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and particularly that last point about risk management, which is an area that we've seeing more and more supply chain executives and companies really starting to pay more attention to. So Ashley, great question. Thank you for asking it. Just to wrap up now, I mean, so for everyone listening today or listening to this program on demand, what advice would you give to an executive in terms of how to get started, right? What's the first step they should take in terms of either getting started in this whole area if they really haven't been working much on truly understanding totally in the cost, or how to keep leveraging TLC in more effective ways, for supply chain benefits.
Yeah, I would start with the process of understanding your business case and the building the commitment to go down a path like this. To me, is the best place to start. I think it's important to understand and emphasize as you carry it forward in your organization why it's such a relevant subject today, why people are talking about it and predicting that it'll become more important in the future. To me, part of the answer lies in that we really evolved from a supply and demand chain and our overall trade marketplace. Our supply chains are as long as they've ever been. They are therefore more critically depended on. There are more options every year in sourcing locations, and mix all that up with volatility, and that's kind of where the business can come from. So volatile labor rates, shifting consumer marketplaces changes your footprint and therefore what it costs. We talked about risk management. So how do you deal with all this? I think most importantly, there's an opportunity to capitalize on it. It's not easy. I think the place to start is building a case for why. The reasons are there. And once you're ready, I would go back to that initial building block of starting with that grain of SKU.
Great point, and good way to kind of nice takeaway for folks to take with them after this program. Certainly, if anyone has any additional questions, we're out of time for today, but you can go ahead and post them on the website, talkinglogistics.com. You'll find today's episode, the archive of today's episode, and you can go ahead and post a comment there and or a question for Chris there, and I'm sure that we can keep the conversation going there, and Chris will be happy to answer questions there as well. Chris, thank you very much for joining us today.
Adrian, thanks very much for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. It's important, and thanks everyone.
Great, and I want to thank everyone joining us today. Those of you who asked questions, great. Again, like I say every week, make sure you tune in every Thursday at noon, where we'll have some great guests, just like Chris we had today, talking about some industry trends and topics that are important and top of mind for supply chain logistics executives. And as you saw, we had a couple of great questions today, and our goal here is really to provide an opportunity for all of you to engage with thought leaders and executives such as Chris to be able to learn from them and get some great advice. So again, thank you all for joining. Look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.